for the Clippers. You get this one credit for a two-possession game. You put the pressure on your defense.
Let me show you, let me take you there. Everything you never wanted. Let me show you.
Bro, we all remember when Paul George got outplayed in some people's eyes by Joe Ingles in the playoffs in 2018. And this was the first year of the big three of the OKC Thunder. We had Melo, we had Russell Westbrook, and then we had Paul George going against a team led by a rookie. Second best players, a Frenchman that we never heard of, and a whole bunch of players that we didn't even know was on the NBA roster. You know what I'm saying? By the casual viewer. You know what I'm saying? I knew him. You know what I'm saying? You know, I've been doing this basketball stuff. A lot of people thought that Joe Ingles outplayed Paul George. It wasn't even that. It was Joe Ingles played better than he was, and Paul George played worse than he was. So it kind of was even. And ever since that moment, ever since that Joe Ingles got into his head, it's been bad for Paul George in the playoffs. Not even his play. Like, if you look at his play-by-play stats, they're not really that bad as people think they are. He has bad luck. For example, last year in the bubble, when they gave up a 3-1 lead, that was completely Paul George. I mean, it was the whole team, but Paul George played like he didn't want to play basketball anymore. Hitting the side of the backboard, which is embarrassing. And then at the end of the game, the interviews, he's talking about, this wasn't a bust if we didn't win the ring. We have so many more things to do next season, Then throwing Doc Rivers under the bus on the podcast. You're looking like a sore loser. It's not the fact that you played bad. It's the fact that how you act after you play bad. Just own up to it. Kawhi Leonard, own up to it. We don't hear Kawhi slander for real when he played bad in the bubble. We don't hear Jimmy Butler slander after what he just did this playoff season. Julius Randle either. They all knew they had to play better. But Paul George want to go around talking about, I got my new trainer now. I'm on everybody next this season. Like, bro, shut up. Just shut up. Paul George, just be quiet and let the game speak for you. Also, with the bad luck, he's getting hella game winners hit over him. So, and to really be good defense. Damian Lillard versus Paul George, that was good defense. If Dame took that shot 10 times out of 10, and if he makes a lot of them, that's Dame. You really can't defend that no better. Or versus Devin Booker in the bubble. Or when Jason Tatum dropped him for a game winner. All of these players are really good defense. It's just Paul George has fucking bad luck. And the media loves to hate on Paul George. Game one, I wouldn't say I expected a big game out of Paul George, but I didn't expect a horrible game out of Paul George. Paul George shot 4 for 17 from the field. What the fuck? And this was a very winnable game. No Mike Conley. Donovan Mitchell didn't really get it cracking until the second half. Paul George had the ball in his hands a lot of the time. Paul George is basically the Clippers' de facto point guard because Rondo is really unplayable sometimes, and Reggie Jackson is better as a catch and shoot option or off the catch than running the offense. And Paul George, you disappointed me, my guy. I'm seeing you take switches on Rudy Gobert and you're shooting step back threes. Paul George, you're 6'9", athletic. Why are you not driving and trying to draw a foul? Why are you not driving and making a layup? Why are you settling for step backs when any other player with your size and skill set will abuse Rudy Gobert on the perimeter? Now, Rudy Gobert got better in the perimeter. I'm not trying to hate on you, Rudy, but it's Paul George. At least I thought it was. I don't know who this player is. Now, I don't want to get on him too bad like Twitter did or social media did because, you know what I'm saying, Kendrick Perkins, Stephen A. Smith, they overreacting to some, Paul George needs to show up. Yes, he does need to show up, but you got to realize the context. They just came off a 7-game series, a hard one at that, where they had to really battle every game, be locked in on offense and defense, because if you wasn't, Luka was killing you on that end, and you had to guard Luka as well, and then you had to really score on the Mavericks too. And Paul George had to do everything, including playmake. And it was hard. And they only had 2 days of rest. And I think the Jazz had like 5 days of rest. So it's easy for them to have that energy. And that's what Donovan Mitchell showed. I hate the Clippers as a team, but I don't hate Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. It's really hard for me to hate NBA players, especially if you do this at a high level and I watch you all the time. That's what I'm saying. Like, I don't understand how some of y'all hate on certain basketball players when this is your favorite part of your day. How do you hate on the best of the best sometimes? So I do want them to succeed in their own right. Not saying I want them to win a ring or anything like that, but I do want them to succeed. I don't want Paul George to lay another egg because at this point, it really is just mental. It always has been, because we remember Paul George for the Indiana Pacers. That man was really playoff P. He was taking LeBron James to competitive series in the Eastern Conference Finals. Like, that was Paul George, and he was like 22 back then. Now, I know the injuries stopped him and everything like that, but Paul George basically had his best season in 2019, saying he was the MVP, and then he got really embarrassed with the last shot with Damian Lillard. That's the slander. That's where the slander comes in. And I just want Paul George to persevere, bro. Like, you really can't make no excuses anymore. Like I said, Donovan Mitchell had 10 points in the first half. He finished with 45. You know why? Because he was locked in. He stood over any obstacle that was in his way. He didn't let the fans, he didn't let the media get to him when Shaq was hating, all that. He just locked in, stayed with his teammates, and then balled out. Fuck what everybody else got to say about you, PG. Ball out. I don't care if I slander you tomorrow. I don't care. Ball out. Like, at some point, you got to get over that hurdle, bro. At some point. That's the only way you can grow as a player and as a human being. Don't care what anybody else has to say. And to be honest, I'm really tired of the PG slander. It was cool like the first two years because there was a lot of memes that came out of it. At this point, it's just really sad, bro. The kids are watching. The women are watching you stink it up. It's not cool no more. And I think the Clippers are the underdog. You know, I root for the underdog, especially the players. And PG shouldn't even be an underdog, bro. Like, you're Paul George. 7-time All-Star, All-NBA first team one season, MVP candidate one season. You should be way better than this. The thing I want Paul George to do when his shooting is not on, I want him to do the things that he did last series. Paul George was a great playmaker last series, being the de facto point guard, setting everybody up, setting the tone, setting the pace. Paul George was great defensively, not on Luka. Luka was getting his, but the thing about Luka is you got to watch out for everybody around you because Luka will throw a dot without me looking. So Paul George was great getting into the passing lane, closing out airspace for shooters, getting rebounds, timely steals, timely blocks. He was doing that as well, and also was drawing fouls. If your shot is not on, get to the free throw line. Then your shot gonna be on. That's what I want Paul George to do. He's more than just a scorer, in my opinion. It's not just scoring with Paul George. That's not what he gets paid to do. He gets paid to fit in the Clippers need him to do. And we seen that last game. When Paul George came out the game, there was really trapping Kawhi Leonard the whole time. That's why Paul George played all these damn minutes, because without Paul George, this team is really ass for real. But social media gonna really say something different. I'm rooting for you, Paul George. I know I hated on the Clippers in the past, on camera and to myself, but you know what I'm saying? Things change. So come back better game 2. Hopefully you get some better rest, ice them knees up, and yeah, your legacy is on the line, bro. That'd be all for this video, bro. Make sure you like and subscribe, man. I'm out. Peace.